She went out for her usual morning jog, following the same route she always did. Her phone tracked every mile, every pause, just like it always had. That morning, the app kept running, but she never came back. Who else knew exactly where she would stop? She ran most mornings before work, not because she was training for anything, but because it gave her a sense of order before the day started pulling at her. The streets were quiet at that hour. The air felt cleaner. It was the one part of the day that belonged entirely to her. She lived alone in a modest apartment on the edge of town, close enough to downtown to commute easily, far enough out that the neighborhood still felt residential. Her routine rarely changed. Wake up, lace up her shoes, start the tracking app on her phone, step outside while the sky was still pale and unfinished. The app mattered to her more than she admitted. It logged her distance, her pace, her consistency. It gave shape to progress she could see. Over time, it had also created something else without her really thinking about it, a record of where she went and when she went there. Her route was familiar down to the smallest detail. A left turn after 3 blocks, a gradual incline near the park, a stretch where she always slowed, not because she was tired, but because she liked the quiet there. A tree-lined curve where the sidewalk dipped slightly and the street noise faded away. She had paused there hundreds of times before. Long enough to catch her breath, long enough to check her watch, long enough to feel like the world was holding still with her. She wasn't secretive about her runs. Friends knew she jogged in the mornings. Coworkers joked about her discipline. The app itself was social by design, encouraging, sharing. It turned private habits into small public achievements. She had never adjusted the privacy settings. There had never seemed to be a reason to. On that morning, nothing felt different. She stretched briefly on the porch, pressed start on her phone, and set off at an easy pace. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the pavement. A few cars passed, drivers barely noticing her. As she ran, the app quietly collected data: distance, time, location. Each step added to a pattern that already existed, one that was consistent enough to predict. She reached the park entrance and followed the path she always did. Her breathing settled into rhythm. The familiar curve approached, the spot where she usually slowed. She reduced her pace and came to a stop, just like every other morning. The phone remained in her hand, screen still lit. The app continued to track, waiting for movement to resume. From the outside, it looked like nothing at all. Just a woman taking a short break during a jog. Just another data point in a long line of similar mornings. But that was the moment the route stopped being routine. Minutes passed, then more. The app kept recording, marking her location as unchanged. No forward progress, no new distance, just a pause that stretched longer than it ever had before. And somewhere beyond the screen, beyond the numbers and maps, someone else already knew exactly where she would be standing. She had started using the app years earlier, back when running felt harder and motivation came and went. At first, it was just a way to keep herself honest, a digital nudge to get out the door. Over time, it became something more familiar, a quiet companion that marked her days without asking questions. She followed a few friends on it, old college roommates, a coworker who biked on weekends, people she hadn't seen in years, but still recognized through numbers and routes and small notes of encouragement. A thumbs up, a brief comment, nice pace, early start. It felt supportive, harmless. She never thought much about who could see what. Her runs were set to public by default. That was how the app worked unless you changed it. She assumed most people didn't care. Thousands of routes existed. Hers was just one thin line on a map. The truth was, her consistency made her visible. Same days, same time window, same loop. The predictability that made running feel safe also made it easy to recognize. There were familiar faces along the route. A man who walked his dog near the park entrance. A woman who watered her plants around the same time each morning. A barista unlocking the coffee shop a few blocks away. They didn't know her name, but they knew her face. She belonged to the morning, just like they did. Sometimes someone would nod or wave. She always returned it. Politeness felt automatic, the kind of small trust you offer without thinking. She posted her runs without much thought afterward. Not every time, but often enough. Distance, time, a map traced cleanly across the screen. The comments were brief, encouraging, forgettable. She liked that her father, who lived states away, could see she was staying active. She liked that friends knew she was doing well. It felt like sharing a small piece of her life without having to explain anything. The app didn't feel like exposure. It felt like routine. That morning followed the same pattern. She ran. She slowed at the curve. She stopped. The app continued to log her location, marking the pause as it always did. But unlike other mornings, the pause didn't end quickly. Her pace never picked back up. The line on the map stayed fixed. From a distance, it would have looked like nothing. Just a runner catching her breath a little longer than usual. The app didn't ask questions. It didn't send alerts. It simply waited. As the minutes passed, her activity remained visible. Anyone checking could see the same thing. A dot on a familiar stretch of road. A pause at the same spot she always used. It was subtle, easy to miss. But to someone paying attention, it was unmistakable. Her routine had created a rhythm, and that rhythm had been available to anyone who knew how to look. The app kept recording, and somewhere else, a decision was already being made based on information she had never meant to give away. The first sign that something was wrong didn't come from the app. It came from the absence of movement. Her route usually showed a clear rhythm. Run, slow, pause, then forward again. That morning, the pause stretched on, long enough to feel unusual even by her standards. She would normally start moving again within a minute or two. Sometimes she lingered, checking her pace or adjusting her music, but never like this. The dot on the map stayed fixed, anchored to the same bend in the road. She didn't notice that detail herself. She was there in the moment, standing in a place that had always felt quiet and neutral. Trees on one side, a low fence on the other. The street curving just enough that cars slowed naturally as they passed. Nothing about it had ever felt threatening. A car drove by and continued on. Another followed a few moments later. The morning remained calm, ordinary. Her phone stayed in her hand. The screen dimmed, then brightened again as the app continued to record. Time passed in small, uncounted pieces. The kind of time you lose track of when you expect to start moving again any second. She heard footsteps behind her and assumed they would pass, just like the cars had. Runners crossed paths all the time. Walkers too. The trail was shared. That was part of why it felt safe. When the footsteps slowed, she turned slightly, more out of courtesy than concern. A brief glance. A half smile she didn't fully form. The man didn't look out of place. He wore running shoes, dark jacket, nothing distinctive. The kind of person you would forget seconds after passing. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak without raising his voice. He said her name. The sound of it caught her off guard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was casual, almost familiar, as if they had met before and she was simply failing to remember. She frowned, instinctively checking her phone, as if her name might be written there somehow. It wasn't. She hadn't introduced herself. She hadn't spoken to him before. He smiled when he saw the confusion. Not apologetic, reassuring. He mentioned her pace, complimented her consistency, said he'd seen her runs on the app, said it like it explained everything. The words landed slowly. She understood them individually, but not all at once. The idea that someone she didn't know had been watching her routine felt abstract at first, like a misunderstanding that would clear itself up. She laughed, lightly, the way people do when they're unsure how to respond. She said something vague in return. Thanks. Yeah, I try to keep it up. Her instinct was to move, to start running again, to turn the pause back into motion. But the moment had shifted. The casual bubble she'd been standing in had thinned. He stayed where he was, too close to ignore, too calm to confront easily. Her phone buzzed softly as the app marked more time without progress. The screen glowed between them for a second, illuminating the map she'd shared without thinking. The pause was no longer just a pause. It was a point of contact. And as she stood there, trying to decide how to step away without making the situation worse, the feeling settled in that this wasn't random. Someone hadn't just crossed her path. Someone had been waiting for her to stop. She shifted her weight and took a small step forward, intending to start running again. It was a simple decision, the kind she'd made 1,000 times before. Just move. Just go. He stepped with her, not directly in front of her, not blocking her path outright, just enough to stay close. Close enough that starting to run would mean brushing past him. She hesitated. The pause stretched again, heavier this time. He kept talking, his voice steady, conversational. He mentioned the weather, said it was a good morning for a long run, commented on how consistent she was, how impressive it was to keep the same pace day after day. Each detail felt too specific, too informed. She asked how he knew her name, finally letting the question surface. Her voice came out calm, even, but it took effort to keep it that way. He shrugged, as if it were obvious, said it was on the app, said people shared more than they realized, said he followed a lot of runners in the area. Motivation, he called it. Accountability. She nodded slowly, not agreeing, just acknowledging the words. Her grip tightened around her phone. The screen had gone dark again. She tapped it awake, out of habit. The map was still there. The route line, the dot marking her location. The pause, still ongoing. He glanced down at it, briefly, like he was checking the time. Then he looked back up at her. "You usually head back this way," he said, gesturing behind her, toward the street she'd come from. "Loop finishes up near the apartments, right?" Her stomach tightened. It wasn't a question. She took another step, this time angling away from him, toward the curb, toward the open street, toward movement. He adjusted again, still calm, still casual. His presence narrowed the space without ever fully closing it. A car approached in the distance, engine sound growing louder, then passed without slowing. The driver didn't look. There was nothing to look at. Just two people standing on the side of the road. She considered calling someone, considered turning the phone to speaker, considered saying something loud, something clear. Instead, she said she was late, said she needed to get back. He smiled, small and tight. "You've got time," he said. "You always do." The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than the words themselves. She felt the moment tipping, the way it does just before you realize a situation can't be talked down. She took a breath and stepped again, this time committing to the movement. That was when his hand reached out, not grabbing, not yanking, just touching her elbow lightly, as if to guide her back, as if the space belonged to him. The contact lasted less than a second, but it changed everything. She pulled her arm away instinctively, the motion sharp and sudden. Her heart started to race, no longer controlled by breath or pace. He raised his hands slightly, palms out. "Relax," he said. "I'm not doing anything." But he didn't move away. She looked past him, scanning the street, the park entrance, anywhere that felt open. The quiet that had once felt peaceful now felt exposed. Her phone buzzed in her hand again, another minute logged without movement, another marker of stillness. This time, she didn't look at the screen. She looked at him, and in that moment, standing at the exact place she always paused, she understood that the route she trusted had led her to a point she couldn't simply run past. Whatever came next would not be part of her routine, and the app, still recording, would not capture the decision she was about to make. She turned away from him abruptly and stepped off the curb, choosing the street over the path. It wasn't a plan. It was instinct. Movement felt safer than stillness, even if it meant putting herself closer to traffic. He followed without hesitation, not running, not grabbing, just walking beside her, matching her pace, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Anyone passing would have seen two people moving in the same direction. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming. She picked up speed. Her jog broke into a short sprint, heart hammering now. breath uneven. The sound of her shoes against the pavement felt too loud in the quiet morning. He called out once. Her name again, louder this time. She didn't respond. Her phone slipped in her grip as she ran. She tightened her hold on it, thumb brushing the screen by accident. The app stayed open. The map stayed visible. The line that marked her route extended only slightly before stopping again. A car pulled out of a nearby driveway ahead of her. She slowed instinctively, uncertain which way to go around it. The hesitation cost her. He closed the distance in those few seconds. His hand caught her wrist, firmer this time. Not violent, controlled. Enough to stop her forward motion. She pulled back hard, the phone slipping free and hitting the pavement. The screen cracked but stayed lit, the map still visible, the dot now fixed in place once more. The moment drew no attention. The car drove away. The street returned to stillness. He leaned in close, his voice low. He told her to calm down. Told her she was making it worse. Told her he just wanted to talk. She twisted her arm, trying to break free. Her breathing came in short, shallow bursts. The quiet felt unbearable now, as if it were swallowing sound as soon as it existed. Her phone buzzed weakly on the ground, logging another minute without progress. He glanced down at it, then back at her. His grip tightened, not in anger, but with intention. What happened next didn't unfold loudly. There was no scream that carried, no sudden burst of motion that demanded attention. Just a brief struggle contained within a space no one was watching closely. When it was over, the street looked the same. The phone lay where it had fallen, screen dimming as the app continued to track. The route showed a final cluster of movement, tight and erratic, then nothing. Minutes passed, then more. No new distance, no return loop, no end-of-run marker. The app kept recording until the battery drained enough to stop sending updates. The last signal fixed her location at that bend in the road, the exact place she always paused. Eventually, footsteps moved away from the spot. Only one set. The morning continued around it. Cars passed. The sun climbed higher. The quiet returned to something that looked like normal. But the route never resumed. The dot on the map stayed frozen there, a silent marker of a routine that would never complete itself. And for the first time since she started running, the app captured not her progress, but her absence. When she didn't come home, no one panicked right away. She had work that morning. Sometimes she ran long and rushed straight from the route to the shower. Sometimes her phone died and she forgot to charge it. Small explanations filled the space where worry might have gone. By mid-morning, those explanations started to thin. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Text messages showed as sent but never delivered. The quiet stretched past what felt normal for her. She was careful about checking in. She didn't disappear without saying something. A coworker sent a casual message first, then another. When neither was answered, the tone shifted. A friend tried calling next, then her sister. Each unanswered attempt added weight to the silence. The app still showed her run from that morning. Distance logged. Time elapsed. The route line ending abruptly at the same curve near the park. No cool-down walk. No completed activity. Just a pause that never resolved. At first, it looked like a glitch. Apps froze all the time. Phones lost signal. But when someone refreshed the page hours later and saw the same frozen, the concern deepened. That wasn't how her runs ended. Her apartment was quiet when someone stopped by later that afternoon. Shoes by the door, keys on the counter. Nothing packed, nothing disturbed. It looked like she'd stepped out briefly and planned to come back. Her car was still parked where she always left it. The app became the clearest record of her last normal movements. Not because it explained anything, but because it showed exactly where things stopped making sense. The timing, the location, the fact that the pause was longer than any she'd ever taken before. Friends began sharing screenshots, comparing notes. The curve by the park, the timestamp, the lack of follow-up activity. Everyone saw the same thing. As evening approached, the questions grew sharper. Had anyone seen her that morning? Had anyone spoken to her after the run? The answers were all the same. No. The space where she should have been grew louder than any explanation. That night, the app sent a quiet notification to her phone, still lying somewhere beyond reach. A reminder to log her next activity. A prompt built on routine, unaware that the routine had ended. By the next morning, the concern had hardened into something heavier. The kind of worry that doesn't lift when you sleep. The kind that settles in the chest and stays there. The run that had once felt like proof of her discipline now felt like a timeline. One that ended in a place she trusted. And the silence that followed wasn't just about a missing person. It was about a pattern that had been visible to anyone who looked. And a moment when that visibility became something else entirely. As the days passed, attention narrowed around the same small stretch of road. The curve near the park. The place where her run always slowed. Where it had stopped entirely. People began to talk about that spot the way you talk about a room after something bad has happened in it. Carefully. With an awareness that it now held meaning it hadn't before. Questions came from different directions. Friends compared timelines. Co-workers replayed their last conversations with her, searching for something they might have missed. Family members asked about her routine, the app she used, the settings she'd never changed. Each answer added detail, but none added clarity. The app's data became the center of gravity. It showed what it showed, and nothing more. The time she started, the distance she ran, the pause that never ended. There was no dramatic spike, no sudden detour, no clear indication of what interrupted her. Just a line that stopped behaving the way it always had. People noticed something else, too. Her route was public. Always had been. Anyone could see it. Anyone could scroll back through weeks of runs and learn the pattern. Same mornings. Same window of time. Same place where she paused. The idea unsettled everyone who heard it. Someone remembered a comment on one of her posts from weeks earlier. Harmless at the time. Just a note about her consistency. Another person recalled her mentioning a stranger who had said her name once, casually, during a run. She hadn't seemed worried then. She hadn't told the story as a warning. Just an odd moment. Now it felt different. The absence created its own pressure. Silence has a way of forcing questions to surface. Why hadn't she changed her privacy settings? Why hadn't she told anyone she felt uncomfortable? Why had she stopped at the same place every time? Each question carried an implied answer that no one wanted to say out loud. Digital traces were compared and rechecked. The app showed when her activity became visible, when it stopped updating, how long it remained live before the signal ended. The data didn't accuse anyone, but it didn't defend anyone either. It simply existed, unblinking. People walked the route themselves, standing where she had stood, trying to see what she might have seen. From that angle, the street looked ordinary. Cars passed. The park felt open. There was no obvious corner to hide in, no clear threat. That was what made it worse. Accounts began to conflict in small ways. Someone thought they'd seen her that morning, but couldn't be sure. Another person remembered a man jogging nearby, but couldn't describe him. The details blurred the more they were repeated. Online, strangers weighed in. Some blamed the app. Some blamed her routine. Some blamed the absence of obvious danger signs. The noise grew louder, but the truth stayed quiet. What remained consistent was the pattern, the predictability, the way her life had become legible through data meant to motivate, not expose. The pressure built not around a suspect, but around an idea that what happened to her wasn't random, that it had been enabled slowly, invisibly, through information shared without concern, and that the most unsettling part wasn't how quickly things went wrong. It was how long the conditions for it had existed without anyone noticing. The route is still there. The sidewalk curves the same way. The trees still lean inward, just enough to soften the noise from the street. People run past it every morning without stopping, without knowing why that stretch of road feels heavier than the rest. Her profile remains frozen in time. The last run still visible. Distance logged. Pace calculated. A pause that never resolved. The app preserves it without judgment, a record of consistency ending mid-pattern. For the people who knew her, that frozen line became something they carried quietly. A reminder that nothing dramatic had marked the end of her routine. No warning, no clear break, just an ordinary morning that never finished. The conversations around it eventually slowed, not because the questions were answered, but because living inside unanswered questions takes a toll. Life pressed forward the way it always does, unevenly, without regard for what it leaves behind. What lingered was a shift in how people moved through their own routines. Settings were changed, routes were varied, small pauses were taken in different places, or not at all. The idea that safety could be inferred from habit no longer felt reliable. The app continued to encourage movement, to share progress, to celebrate streaks. It wasn't built to recognize when a pattern became a vulnerability. It couldn't distinguish between discipline and predictability. It simply reflected what it was given. Her story didn't end with a clear lesson or a clean explanation. There was no moment where everything came into focus. Just an understanding that trust doesn't always come from people. Sometimes it comes from systems that feel neutral, even helpful, until they aren't. She had trusted her routine, trusted that familiarity meant safety, trusted that sharing small pieces of her life carried no real risk. None of those choices felt reckless at the time. They felt normal. That's what stayed with the people who thought about her most. The ordinariness of it. The way nothing about that morning demanded alarm. The way danger didn't announce itself or break the rhythm until it was already too late. The route still waits, unchanged, for the next runner to slow down at that same curve. The app still logs pauses, still draws lines, still turns movement into something visible. And somewhere inside that quiet exchange between data and habit is a question no one can fully answer. How many moments feel safe simply because they always have? How many patterns feel harmless until someone else is paying attention? Her run ended where it always did. The difference was that this time, someone else knew exactly where to wait.